well, everyone was happy enough without money in them years because there was nothing to be bought, only tea and sugar and salt was cheap.
Belturbet has always been famous, as it were, for the crack, and people always have managed to enjoy themselves.
Erne Butler at the plantation, it's a plantation town. There was nothing there prior to 1611, and the British government sent over this Stephen Butler. He was a Welshman.
I didn't remember very much of the smuggling myself. Now, I was young at the time, but I believe there was quite a bit. I wouldn't like to indulge it too far into.
I seen the blood. My father was a huntsman and his father before him. And my mother's side was hunters. It's in the two sides of the family. Aye.
Well, the town at the turn of the century would be much more populated than it is now, heavier populated. It had a lot of connections with South Fermanagh, and the South Fermanagh people all came up the river in their boats and cots and went to the markets in Belturbet.
Gilloon is town land 1 of 6, and St. Tierna came there in the end of the 6th century, and he founded a monastery. He was a County Tyrone man. His grandfather was the king of West Ulster, but in 836 the monastery was destroyed by the Danes. They had invaded Ireland at that time, and they burned it.
And it sprang from there, and it's got bigger and bigger till you see what it is today.
Attention please, the rally is now leaving Belturbet for Quiffy Waters. So all crews get their boats running. The rally is now leaving for Quiffy Waters. Thank you very much.
Belturbet, it means in Irish mouth of the spring, Tibret, and Bell is mouth. That was the old name of the town.
A recent wonderful archaeological find in Belturbet is the discovery of a motte and bailey on Turbot Island, which was constructed by the Normans during their military campaign in Ireland in the 13th century. It must have been the most northerly advance of the Normans into Ulster.
Next settlement we know of in Belturbet would be about 1610. Belturbet was a plantation town. There was a Sir Stephen Butler, received a charter from Charles II, and he got a grant of 1,600 acres in the Belturbet, Newtown Butler and Butler's Bridge area. And he came over and built a house on the river bank and brought over a lot of settlers and set up the town because it was at the ford in the river. That's why it was probably important to the Normans as well as to the other later settlers. It was the first crossing place in the river.
But James Wishart, or Weishart, whichever way you wish to pronounce it, he got about 30 town lands for grant, and he started to build a castle where the rectory is at Erne Butler, and he was proceeding to build it, and then Butler found out that he was subletting the land back to the Irish at big money, so Butler took over the castle and the estate and put out Wishart. So Butler finished building the castle and lived in it, and then he built a village called after him. Then he went up to Belturbet and he built a castle there, and he lived there, and he died in September 1631.
Belturbet was granted its coat of arms in 1613. Its role, dictated by its geography, was that of an outpost for the protection of Enniskillen. We have a pie order parchment granting 2 additional fairs to Belturbet, dated 1773. It was granted by George III. We had a butter market, pork market, and various other markets.
And it was the main market town in County Cavan at that time of life. And of a pork fair day, the men would be in with horses and carts, asses and carts, and some of them have 2, some of them have 3, and an odd man 5 pigs at that time in life. But no man could buy them till the bell rang at 9 o'clock in the morning.
And every Thursday was a market day where eggs, butter, poultry, the like of that. Once a month was a fair. Cattle, horse, sheep. There was a pork market every Wednesday. And all from the surrounding districts come from, even before the narrow gauge railway would come here, Cavan and Leitrim. They come from as far as Mohill with pigs to be sold in Belturbet. was a famous market.
It was great times around Balturbet at that time. There must have been about, at least, there must have been about 26 public houses in it. I remember 9 of them gone in my time. And when I was a lad going to school, every Thursday they'd go about 25 cots, some of them boats, smaller boats, you know, they were handy out of pole, and they'd go up with their eggs and their butter. And in the harvest time, the plums, apples, all come down there. They called it the ducking stools. You know, the jetty where the cruiser comes in now, that was called the ducking stool at that time.
The town commissioners at the time had powers to pass bylaws, and they could sentence what they called tinkers and dustyfoots to came into the town on fair days and created a nuisance. They could sentence them to be ducked on the ducking stool.
Well, they said it's recorded. There's for scolding wives or naughty women. There was sentenced, they got so many dips in the water. There was a long plank that went out on a swivel, and there was a chair on the end. There was no strapped in that. They got submerged so many times.
Most of the Catholics lived outside the borough, and if they're caught inside the borough after dark and before dawn, they were ducked. I would be inclined to believe that theory.
One of the peculiar points, if you like, about the Erne is that it did tend to flood quite an amount in the past, and so villages and places like that were built quite far back from the water, and so we don't have as many little villages and hamlets and so on coming right down to the water's edge as we find along some of the other waterways, and so the ones that we have are very important, particularly from in the present tourist point of view.
There's a story told of a man that came into Fermanagh looking for Lough Erne, and he was told, well, sir, Lough Erne is in Fermanagh in the summertime, but Fermanagh is in the Erne in the wintertime.
We are here now at the jetty of Lanesborough Lodge, or what's more commonly referred to locally as Quivy Castle. It wasn't a castle in a strict sense. It was only built in the 1800s. A very fine house. It was mainly used as a summer lodge. It was church, school, laundry, everything, even including its own ice house, where of course they could keep ice for the gin and tonics, no doubt, of those days.
At that time there'd be about 70 men working in Quivy. My grandfather worked in it, and he'd have to cross the river to go to it. And the work started at 7 o'clock in the morning, and the bell went at 7 in the morning and 7 in the evening. And they had a shilling a day. Well, then Quivy was burned in the time of the first trouble in 1920, and that ended that story.
It was from here that they operated steamboats, and of course there were quite a number of pleasure boats on the Erne at that stage, and between Castle Sanderson and Crum Castle and Quivy Castle here, or Lanesborough Lodge, and they raced usually out on the lakes and so on. So it was really quite one of the 3 major houses at that time, and now it seems very remote.
Well, the main families that lived around here were the Butlers. They were very big landlord families. They lived here and at Lanesborough Lodge, lived in Balturbet and at Lanesborough Lodge. And then the Saundersons of Castle Saunderson were also very big landlords. They lived at Castle Saunderson. And then the Creightons of Crum Castle.
And there was another family lived near New Bridges known as Beresfords, and another family at Bellisle owned a lot of yachts there. Now, they used to run yacht races a couple times a year, and very competitive, took it very seriously.
Life here at Crum was centred very much around the boathouse, because people came here to sail, and it was the Lough Yacht Club. It started here, and they competed against each other all the time in marvellous yachts and gave each other wonderful prizes.
My father came here
in 1916, and he came as a foreman gardener. And at that time, they grew their own flowers, pots, flowers and all for the castle, and I had to keep the castle supplied in fresh flowers. And they done the vegetables.
When we lived at the farm, there was quite a few children at it. There was about 6 or 7 houses occupied at the farm at that time. And we all had a long walk to school. Left home about 9 o'clock in the morning and went round, had to walk round by the old castle and round by the bridge and down to the quay. And we got the ferry about 9:45.
The water here at Crum goes straight through the middle of the estate, so therefore it becomes an essential part of our lives here, especially if we want to visit another part of the place, especially on Sundays when we go to church by an amazing boat we have here called the Cot.
I was 4-year-old when I went to school, and I obviously went by the Cot. So I remember the first day I went, I cried all day, but I couldn't get home because there was no other way home. And at an early age we learned to row the Cot, because the ferrymen always made us do our bit.
Many would say that they were quite a dangerous boat, but they were very large ones and they were used for moving cattle from one side to the other and so on.
Nowhere else in Ireland will you get a cot like the Lough Erne cot. It's brought up at both ends and it's so designed that you can go in on the slipway and unload any goods they might have on board.
There were a number of steamships that plied here on the lake. The two most famous ones, if you like, were the SS Belturbet and the SS Knockninny, and they were owned by a gentleman called Porter from Belle Isle. We also have an account from those days of the alcohol playing a part, and maybe if you don't mind I would read a little account. At Enniskillen Petty Sessions on the 17th of November 1890, William Mitchell, captain and engineer of SS Belturbet, showed his certificate under surveys of the Board of Trade and proved that Donner McManus of Corner a passenger, was drunk and disorderly on the voyage from Enniskillen to Knockninny with 102 passengers on board. McManus was fined £2 and 5 shillings or a month in Sligo jail for his drunkenness and disorder, and 5 shillings cost for his mischief under the clauses of the Merchant Shipping Act. One would assume that that was maybe coming from a fair or something in Enniskillen, and hence the alcohol being involved. But things haven't changed really very much, have they?
The cavalry barracks in Belturbet was built in the 1730s. It housed 100 horse and 150 men, and it was occupied until 1922 when the British Army withdrew from Ireland. In recent years, when they were demolishing it, the workmen came across a very interesting stone which predates the barracks. Its the date is 1699, and the letters W.R., which would be King Billy, engraved on it, and the stone is now set in the wall along the river.
Well, this is the old castle, which was called, in those days, the Castle of Crum. It was built in 1610 by Michael Balfour, but later on it was leased to somebody called Dr. James Spottiswoode in 1624. Now, when he died in 1644, he left it to his children, and it was Mary, which was his third daughter. She married someone called Abraham Crichton, which thus started the family seat here at Crum. And then later on, it's withstood 2 sieges. King James came over from the south, over in Belturbet over there, and tried to take the old castle.
Colonel Abraham Crichton was in charge of the castle, and he got 2 men out in the darkness at night in a cot, and they went down to Enniskillen, and they got the English to come to the relief of Crum, and the Irish army found that out, and they lifted the siege after 12 days, and they proceeded into Newton Butler. They stayed overnight, and the army set out the next morning to meet the English on the road, and they met them about near Lisnaskey.
On the day of that battle, a small section of McCarthy's army left Belturbet and marched down the Derravona road until they reached this pass here on the River Erne. They tied cot boats together to cross on to the island of Inishfendra. McCarthy suffered a heavy defeat that day in Lisnaskea. The section of the army which had crossed by this narrow pass fled from the battlefield.
When they came back, they said that the cuts had been cut by some woman by the name of Fitzpatrick. They were, those family, we all get it, remember. We were all called cut-the-gads.
The Williamite forces showed no mercy. They slaughtered every one of them. Ever since, this place has been known as the Bloody Pass. As many as 500 men are said to be buried in this mass burial ground.
I think after then it went on to have quite a happy life at the old castle. It was pretty normal until the tragedy happened in 1764 when it was burnt down accidentally by fire. And then in 1840, the new present castle, which we live in today, was built by Edward Lough. Now, he was a fascinating man because he built Crum. They call it like a fairy tale castle. My father gave the Crum estate to the National Trust about 2 years ago, and we are immensely grateful for what they've done for us here at Crum. We can be sure that the lands and the grounds can be maintained and looked after for the future generations to come. Unfortunately, the sailing here at Crum came to an end because of the hydroelectric scheme, which was built at Ballyshannon, therefore lowering the lake. And, of course, the construction of the new bridges, which meant these lovely yachts with their very tall masts couldn't get underneath them. And that, I'm afraid, forced the Lough Yacht Club to move more up to Enniskillen.
The water level here on the Erne was 6 to 8 foot higher than normally would be now. And after that drainage, it dropped. We had commercial traffic on the Erne in those years. And after that, it ceased, the level dropped. And of course, the railways put an end to the commercial traffic on the waterway.
Then the railway came. First of all, the broad gauge, GNR came, and then the narrow gauge from Sligo Leitrim. So we had 2 railway stations. There were 2 or 3 markets in a week. And there was a fair every month. And it was quite a busy place then. But then that changed with, first of all, the building of the new bridges at near Lisnaskea connected south Fermanagh with north Fermanagh. And then the border came in the 1920s and caused more disruptions.
There was no fairs in Newton Butler, only one every 12th of May. That's called the May Fair. And we used to be watching to get into it and gather up, have our pennies gathered up. There was no border at the time. An old fella came down from Baltover, the name and loan, and he had everything. Mouth organs and tin whistles and little rubber balls to play with and flutes and all this, you know. Then, when the economic war started here in 1933, was it, I think, they started a monthly fair, and it lasted until '56. The railway then closed in '56, and the fair went to Lisnaskea. You get in Newton Butler and only change at Clonus and sit on ahead to Belfast.
And there was a famous Canon Maguire in Newton Butler that time. He was very much against potching making. He got up in church and gave a sermon on the evils of potching making, and how a man whom you all know, but who I won't mention, in the area has had to emigrate due to, and he's broken out of house and home. So he arrived in America, this man, just at the beginning of the Prohibition. And the mafia got on to him. They give any money for a person who could make drink. And of course, he was an expert. So he just had to keep making the drink, and they did the selling. In a few years, he was a wealthy man. So when Prohibition ended, he came back to Newton Butler area, a wealthy man, due to his potching making.
I remember a crowd of men, and there must have been about 50 of them, and the 3 stills going. And I went down when I come from school. And the men was all in great for him.
It has been an ancient custom of which Irish men may brag, for with the noble wolfhound our forefathers chased the stag. This custom still has been kept up as time goes quickly on. It would charm the heart of old and young to hear the huntsman's horn. Now the huntsmen just gathered out that day and bet the hills with skill, The first place puss broke cover it was on Kilmore Hill. She headed straight for Kilnacran like an arrow from a bow. And soon the pike they were giving tongue to the cry of tally-ho. That hunt was in 29. I was roughly about 15, between 15 and 16 at that time. And I went with my father to that hunt. It was out just the other side of Newtown Butler, wee bit. Oh, that was a great hunt. It was a better day for a hunt than today, you know.
Didn't even have to catch the dogs that they went home themselves. So it's changed a good wee bit, I suppose.
Well, I'd say that the dogs is faster now than they were then. I'd say that much about them anyway.
Oh, go. Oh, come again out of now, wee Bobby hounds.
At the time of the economic war, Belturbet was a pretty depressed area. Farm prices were very low. But being along the border, the farmers saw the better price for their cattle in the north, so they had to smuggle them over.
You'd be swimming cattle across the river there, you know, and you might be out to here in the water of a cold winter's night. There was plenty of trouble in it, and oftentimes they might get lifted on you. But once in a while, there wasn't a bigger way in the world that was making the laws. When they'd be at it, we'd follow them with a lough of cattle because the police wouldn't lift them that night.
But there was one man who lived down along the river. He told me it was the most valuable cow he had in his whole cows. It was so old it never gave any milk or never had a calf. But he used to bring it down to the river. It was a very good swimmer, and as soon as it was driven near the river, it'd swim across immediately. The other cattle, the smugglers' cattle, would then follow it, and the smugglers would give him probably a shilling or 2 shillings a head at the time, so the cow was paid very well without giving any milk. And he'd bring back the cow each time, of course, and use her the next time.
And it used to be good fun, you know, at the time, and you'd make a few pounds if you got safe. But if you lost all.
The rally has kept going through the most troubled times probably and so on, our history and so on, and there's never been any problems, any hassle, and we don't see any reason why there should be, because we just have one common interest, and that is the enjoying the lakes and the waterways, and it is fabulous, and hopefully that we will now soon reach the stage where we will be able to link the Erne and the Shannons, and if that is to occur, we'll have probably the best waterways in Europe, and certainly the most uncluttered and the most beautiful. And that's of course what the future is, and of course it's essential for an area like this. It's our only asset, if you like.
Well, I hope your programme is very good when you get it. It'll make a millionaire out of you. You're not taking the bottle of beer.
The taxman's taken all my dough and left me in my stately home, blazing on a sunny afternoon, and I can't sail.
Once Upon a Place visits Derry's Waterside next Thursday night at 7:30.
All I've got's this sunny afternoon.